A medieval castle was located on this site. It is estimated to have first been built at about 750 AD by the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia. In Anglo-Saxon times, this castle was earthworks with a wooden timber castle. As you can see, this path is elevated and it is next to a long defensive bank. There are numerous earthworks on the green, and there are also earthworks in the neighbouring churchyard. It is likely that these earthworks are remnants of the medieval castle, although there is also strong earlier history in Newnham-on-Severn, as this was an important part of Roman Britain, because this area was part of Roman Ariconium, so dating the earthworks is difficult, and also there may have been some earthwork alterations in the mid 17th century AD, because the castle site and the church site were reused as fortified sites in the English Civil War. As you can see, we are close to a river, that river being the River Severn, and at about 1300 years ago, on the other side of that river was also land for the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia. However, this site was only about 20 miles away from their borderlands with the Saxon Kingdom of Wessex, that is, if you crossed over the river at this point. Those two kingdoms, the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia and the Saxon Kingdom of Wessex, had a fluctuating border as they fought over territory, so soldiers from this castle site were suitable to cross over the river here in times when other parts of the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia needed reinforcements. This is the most notable castle earthwork remains, this circular enclosure. Also, the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia had major conflicts with the Welsh. The Offa's Dyke defences were built by the Mercian-Welsh border on the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia side, but that didn't stop cross-border fighting. This castle was about 15 miles away from the nearest part of the Welsh border, so this castle was important for housing soldiers for reinforcements in the Welsh conflicts as well. This bridge was built about 200 years ago, so it is modern. It's a modern addition for this site. In Norman times, this castle was under Norman control. Normans usually constructed motte and bailey type castles, which included a very high earthwork part with a tall wooden motte upon it. But there is no earthwork evidence of a Norman motte being here. It is possible that there was a Norman motte where this neighbouring property now is. The castle house. It is highly likely that this property was part of the castle, although if there was a motte here, then it has since been flattened. This is the A48 main road, which is basically built on top of a Roman road. As you can see, there are some earthwork remains in the churchyard. It is highly likely that this was also part of the medieval castle site. In 1171 AD, King Henry II of England ordered an invasion of Ireland. The port at Newnham-on-Severn was well suited for shipbuilding because of its proximity to the Forest of Dean, which had a great stock of trees, and this castle was well stocked with soldiers. About 400 ships sailed from Newnham-on-Severn with about 5,000 English soldiers on board. Nowadays it is rare for a village in Britain to have an armoury, but we have a building known as the Armoury here at Newnham-on-Severn. The armoury is used as a library and a village hall, although back in medieval times there would have been a proper need for a real armoury at Newnham-on-Severn. There was an interesting large double-handed sword known as a Newnham sword, which is sometimes on public display in museums. Although that sword is privately owned and therefore only goes on public display for temporary periods of time. It is said that the sword was a royal gift in the early 13th century AD from King John I of England, and it was not to be used for battle but only to be used for ceremonial purposes. The Lich Gate is fairly modern. It was erected in the late 19th century AD. This is the site of the current parish church. It was built here in the mid-14th century AD, and this church is dedicated to St. Peter. I assume this church was part of the castle prior to the church being built on this part of the hill. The earliest Christian church at Newnham-on-Severn was a wooden church, and that was built by the Anglo Kingdom of Mercia at about 750 AD. Then shortly after the Norman conquest of England in the 11th century AD, that wooden church was replaced with a Norman style church built in stone. That Norman church was on low ground close to the River Severn. It was probably situated on lower ground than the lowest part of this current churchyard. In the mid-14th century AD, the church at Newnham-on-Severn was relocated onto this hill because of the high ground to be away from the dangers of the River Severn. I assume that the castle becomes smaller and they give the part of that castle site for this church. The current church on this hill has a great view of the River Severn, and between 1600 years ago to 2000 years ago there was a fortified Roman river crossing known as Ariconium on the arc bend of the river, so it is probable that there was at least a permanent Roman watch on this site during the period of Roman Britain. There was also a Roman villa within what is now this village, as well as several other Roman sites just a few miles away. This village was part of the larger Roman Ariconi area. The A48 main road appears to be being carved through this ancient castle site to reduce the slope. I assume that in Roman times and medieval times the road would have been higher on a similar level to the castle grounds. Unfortunately, this castle church was mostly destroyed in a large fire during 1881 AD. Hence this church was mostly rebuilt during the late 19th century AD. The oldest remaining part of the stone church is the lower part of the tower, which is still 14th century AD. I assume that the smaller tower adjoining the main tower contains a stone spiral staircase to ascend or descend the levels of the main tower. There's some more visible earthworks on this churchyard. Maybe some of it is from Roman times or Anglo-Saxon times or Norman times, or maybe from the mid 17th century AD during the English Civil War. In medieval times, this church was within the Diocese of Hereford. Then from 1541 AD onwards, this church has been in the Diocese of Gloucester. Let's go and take a look inside the church. Inside this porch, above this entrance door, is a Christian Crusader zigzag style arch. This stonework was probably carved about 900 years ago, and it probably originated from the earlier Norman stone church, which was closer to the River Severn. Because it predates this current church, it was probably moved to this new church when this church was first built in the 14th century AD. The font has some nice stone carvings, and again, this stonework was probably carved about 900 years ago, and it probably originated from the earlier Norman stone church, which was closer to the River Severn, because it predates this current church. It was probably moved to this new church when this church was first built in the 14th century AD. There are indentations on the stone font which were there for a hasp and a hinge to lock the top of the font. That security measure was there to prevent people stealing holy water, because some people stole holy water to use in secret black magic rituals. A list of some of the local clergy. And the list details clergy that predate this church, as the records include the clergy of the earlier Norman stone church going back to 1170 AD, and it also dates into the period of Anglo-Saxon England to 1018 AD, but it doesn't detail any clergy names from the Anglo-Saxon times. There are a few stained glass windows inside, this window section being my favourite. That's a hunting horn.